the making of games and topics related to that. And next up, we've got Ed Veer and Luke Borrett from Mediatonic to talk about bringing games from the east to the west, and specifically their next game, Murder by Numbers. There will be some time for questions at the end as well.
Hello everyone, I'm Catherine Castle from Rock Paper Shotgun, and I'll be interviewing Ed and Luke about all the things that Graham's just mentioned. So sort of just to give a kind of brief introduction of what we're going to be talking about, you guys are, as we said, from Mediatonic, UK studio, and yet you've somehow managed to accomplish the rare feat of working with sort of Japanese giants of the games industry to bring not only their games to the West, but also create wholly new games as well. So sort of hopefully by the time by the time we're done, we'll know how you've managed to accomplish that. So I guess kind of before we get started, maybe let's sort of start at the beginning of your relationship with Japan.
Yeah.
So sort of in 2014, you guys kind of stole all the E3 headlines, that you'd be bringing Hatoful Boyfriend to the West.
Yeah.
Which is, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Hatoful Boyfriend, is a dating simulator where you date pigeons, not handsome children, sort of handsome young people. Sort of tell us how that all kind of came about.
So amongst the designers at Mediatonic at the time, we'd heard about Hatoful Boyfriend, and we used to have these meetings. And I think somebody introduced it one time and was like, "Have you seen this game?" And we all looked at it, and the reaction from all of us was like, "Oh, I wish we'd made that." and I mean that happens a lot. But we looked at this game, we were like, "Oh, I really wish we'd made that." But it was just kind of like we were just like showing things that we found interesting. So we knew we had this idea of it, and then about 6 months later than that, I was in a break in between a project, and I was looking to do something to help improve my Japanese. So I studied Japanese at university. So I was looking at something to do, and I happened across a tweet from Moa, the creator of Hatoful, and she was looking for somebody to help translate some of the side content she'd done. So I thought, that could be something really interesting to do, and obviously I like this thing. So I approached her, but at the same time I told my boss, I was like, "Oh, by the way, I'm going to do this," and just really offhandedly, in his classic style, he just went, "Why don't you ask her for the rights to the game while you're at it?" Which I was not expecting at all.
Yeah.
But I thought, okay, because we'd seen that the game was only playable on really, really old computers. It just didn't translate well to the modern age. So he was like, "Look, we could do an HD version of it, so why don't you ask her?" So I did. So I kind of emailed her, and at the same time as asking about this other stuff, I was like, "Oh, also, by the way, how would you feel if we took your product and kind of remade it for HD?" And I was kind of expecting a very long process of Moa wanting to know what we were about, or some kind of long discussion. But literally, she emailed back the next day and said, "Great, here's all the source files."
Oh right, okay,
she didn't wait for the contract to be signed. She sent everything that day, and that was just how it started.
Yeah, and kind of it's quite a substantial kind of remake as well, in that. There was a new ending written by Moa, as well as a whole new sort of story strand as well that you added. What was it like working with Moa on those new bits? Was it kind of business as usual? Very much this is we've got this down, or were there kind of additional challenges that kind of presented themselves to you?
It was an interesting one because Hatoful Boyfriend as a game, as a concept, it's something that a lot of people know. They're like, "Oh, it's that pigeon dating game."
Yeah.
But anyone who knows Hatoful Boyfriend is like, "Oh, that game goes some places." So there are some expectations that we need to do right by Moa. We need to keep it in the spirit of the weird and wonderful world where you are seemingly the only human in this world of birds when you're creating more content. So there are very well-established characters that people knew and loved, and writing any new content for them had to be a collaborative effort directly with Moa. We couldn't just do what we wanted with the world. She was very happy that she got to extend the world, and we were happy to work with her to do so.
There was a moment where we were unsure about whether we could get HD versions of some of the pigeon photos.
Oh, right, yeah.
And I remember Moa saying, like, I think you're going to have trouble with this one, but I've located a zoo in England that has this particular pigeon, so you can go and take pictures of it. Luckily, we managed to find one without having to do that, but it was very funny. So she wrote all of the extra stuff for it because we felt like it absolutely needed to be done by her. And I translated the extra content that she did from Japanese. And originally at the beginning there had been a question of whether I would retranslate the whole thing, but it had already been translated into English by a fan called Nazarene, and her version was just so good. There was absolutely no reason whatsoever to retranslate that. So I was happy to get a chance to do a little bit. So we did that little bit, and then we did that for the PS4 and PC versions, and then she released it as a standalone thing for Windows as well, I think.
Right. Yeah. So we'll come back to Moa in a moment, of course, because she's obviously done all the artwork for your brand new game, Murder by Numbers. But first, let's talk about the even bigger collaboration that you did with Square Enix on their mobile RPG Heavenstrike.
Yep.
So how did that conversation start? Like, had they seen what you'd done with Hatoful Boyfriend and kind of got in touch that way?
No, actually, they were kind of, they were kind of simultaneous, actually. So we, in like my first 2 months of the company, we did a big tour of Japan, meeting all of the publishers that you know of, and just to introduce them to our company and just get the relationship rolling. And Square were just, we met Square and they seemed really good, and they were really interested about the idea of, because mobile is obviously a global market, they were really interested in the idea of trying to develop something that was like what they did, but doing it abroad.
Yeah.
And so we met with them, and then a little bit later they just sent an email and were just like, here's like a vague concept, like what we're looking for. Why don't you go away and come up with some ideas?
Yeah.
And that's literally what I did.
Yeah.
And then, in the end, we didn't use any of those. As is often the case, very, very early in development, you don't use any of that stuff. It changes beyond all recognition. But it was literally, it was just that they saw that what we'd done on mobile already, and they had some faith in us, I guess. Yeah. It was a really weird. I don't really understand how it happened, but it was very fortunate.
One of those magical moments.
Yeah,
that sort of happens without you knowing how.
Yeah.
But obviously, kind of Square Enix Japan is it's a much bigger operation. It's a massive company. What was it like working with a studio of that size?
Well, Naoko would have a very good answer to this. Unfortunately, Naoko couldn't be here today. She was going to be on the panel. She was kind of our live ops producer. So she was kind of really in contact with them every day when the game was live, and we pushed out content like 3 times a week.
Right.
Like, it was a really crazy update schedule, and that was because that's what the Japanese market was used to. So they were just like, you need to match that, and so that was a massive challenge for us, kind of getting used to that. In terms of like working with that kind of giant company, it was interesting because you'd go and we'd often go there and we'd never be allowed anywhere other than the meeting rooms. I mean, I'm like a massive Square Enix fanboy, so I wanted to go everywhere and see everything, and they were very much like, no, absolutely not. This is a very professional company. But we did get to work with some of their creatives, like some of their character designers and stuff, and it was difficult because everybody had very little time. Everybody was spread between multiple things, so it was literally like grabbing little bits of time where you could, really. Yeah.
And kind of, were there any sort of surprising differences in the way that either you worked or they worked, or kind of how the studio is structured?
I think they were surprised at how many holidays we took. I think they were just like, you're not going to be around for like 2 weeks at Christmas,
right?
And we were like, that's kind of normal. Yeah, like there's not going to be many people around, and it was just like, so I think there was a lot of those kind of little things, but it was very much something that we were able to overcome just over time, and just by being patient with each other. I think we knew that obviously it was going to be a challenge working across 2 cultures like that, but. But they often used to say to us that they felt like British people were very like Japanese people anyway, because we were both island nations.
Yeah.
And so they just felt like we had the same spirit. So they were always very positive. Like we'll be able to work it out. We'll be able to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And there's obvious logistical difficulties just from the sheer like time zone. So you know, with the best will in the world, you know, a lot of us would be asleep on one side of the planet while the rest were, you know, something very important came up. So it was like working out the challenges that came with that, with a game that was in live ops. But ultimately, you know, for us, it's a company where, well, a company to work with. A lot of us starting out in games were like, you know, we grew up on Final Fantasy and things like that. The idea of ever working directly with something like that was like just the most impossible dream. But like, you know, we end up with Cecil from Final Fantasy IV in our game. We end up with characters from Secret of Mana or Zeiken Densetsu, you know, working directly with them. It was a dream come true. It was absolutely wonderful that not only did we get to work with the IP of our childhood dreams, but that we had such partners willing to trust us with this.
Yeah, I was going to say, it wasn't obviously just the main game of Heavenstrike that you worked on. You know, you also did all the collaboration events with all their other sort of Square Enix franchises. Yeah, including Secret of Mana and Final Fantasy IV, and also Deus Ex as well, which are all like big names. So it's like was there a pressure to kind of like keep everything like canon as it were, kind of thing?
I think so. So so basically each brand has its own like management team within Square Enix. So it's very much a case of you say to them what you want to do, and they will approve it or not or whatever. I mean, generally, it was generally fairly easy.
Right.
With the Japanese side, it was generally fairly easy. With the like Square Enix Western properties like Tomb Raider and Hitman and Deus Ex, it was great because they were just like, oh, do what you want. So we, when it came to doing the Deus Ex one, I was just like, you know what, I'm going to try something really outlandish in this like proposal. And I said, how would you feel about us redesigning Adam Jensen as if it was steampunk rather than like, you know, techno future stuff? Very much expecting a no, and they were just like, yeah, go for it. So we did it, and they just approved it. They approved it straight away. They approved all of the dialogue I wrote for Adam Jensen. I was very much like, please help me. I'm like, I have no idea. How do I write dialogue for Adam Jensen? I don't know. And they were just like, oh, it's fine. They were just like really, really good with it. And and even some of the Japanese teams were as well. Like the writer of Final Fantasy IV actually sent me a message to say that like he really liked what I'd written, which for me was like a massive like moment in my kind of professional career. He was like, he said that the cutscenes I wrote had good tempo. I still don't know what that means, but I'm very happy about it. I'll take it.
I mean, so sort of, did any of them kind of involve a little bit more work than the others? Like, were the Japanese sort of series, you know, were they just kind of more checks to go through compared to the Western franchises?
Yes, I think that's probably fair to say. There was. But because Square Enix as a company knows that these collaborations are really important to do, so it wasn't like we ever had to convince anyone to do it.
Right. Yeah.
They were always just like, yeah, of course. It's just, can you know, making sure we did it correctly was the main thing. It was never really, I never really felt like we had to prove ourselves.
Right.
We maybe did when we said to them, could we do a Hatoful Boyfriend
right.
crossover, which we did do, where we had to like introduce pigeons into this world. But,
right.
So that took a bit of persuading.
Right, yeah.
They were like, are you sure? But my approach with the collaborations was that they were a chance for us to do stuff that was more out there. Like I felt like if you didn't take advantage of whatever property you were working with, you were kind of defeating the point of it a little bit. So I was always trying to kind of push it a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. And sort of fast forward to now then, and you've just announced your brand new game, Murder by Numbers, which has a lot of well-known Japanese creatives involved, including Moa Hato as well. And it's been described by, I've sort of collected a couple of the headlines that came out about it, a 90s Hollywood murder mystery game, Phoenix Wright in leg warmers.
I like that one.
And a campy blend of Picross and TV sleuthing. There's sort of some of the to give you a brief idea, just in case you haven't seen the trailer. But we do in fact have the trailer to show now, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
There we are.
Thank you very much.
So explain to us what we've just seen.
Oh God, where do I start? Murder by Numbers is a mixture of like a kind of detective visual novel and a pixel puzzle game. I have to be very careful about what word I use there. It's set in the 90s. It's set in Hollywood in this kind of world of celebrity glitz and glamour and kind of the kind of slightly seedy underbelly underneath that. It's very bright. It's very fun. It's very camp. I think it's probably a way to describe it. It's very much like a kind of a nice, light-hearted, enjoyable ride. I think it's
Yeah, like a lot of people in the studio are a big fan of visual novels. We are the people that did Hatoful Boyfriend HD, so it's kind of a given. But there are things like, Phoenix Wright and Danganronpa that throw in another mechanic to sort of spice it up, keep it interesting.
Yeah.
And Ed came up with a very cool idea of how can we make this sort of like puzzle mechanic, like what you are solving the mystery with.
Yeah.
And it turned out as we prototyped it, that it just worked really well. Like the pace of one kept going really nicely with the other, and just it all kept on coming together. And as you can see from the trailer, so Ed reached out to Moa, and she was interested on character design, and we somehow wound up working with Sugimori-san, the composer from Phoenix Wright, which is a dream come true for me personally. Just all these things came together, and it's made it into this weird, wonderful game that we're so happy to have announced earlier this month.
Yeah, I was going to say, probably people in the audience, if it wasn't already in the trailer, you probably would have heard it immediately. It's like, that sounds very much like Phoenix Wright. And I think we've got a track with some gameplay kind of showcasing one of the new tracks, which hopefully we can play just while we're talking.
This is one of the tracks that plays while you're solving the puzzle.
Yeah.
I won't talk over it.
That's very jazzy for
Yeah, I mean, there is the question of, like, does that fit in with something where you're investigating murders? But it really comes down to the fact that I was really determined to make something that was really kind of bright and poppy. And I really, I feel like a lot of indie games go for the kind of the somber and the meaningful. And I think that's great. And I totally applaud people doing that. But when I thought about it, that just didn't appeal to me. I wanted to make something that was just like I just sometimes describe it as like a bit of a warm hug, and I think that's kind of the game I wanted to make.
At what point did Sugimori come on board?
Well, it's been a long time coming because we've got basically a point of contact for a lot of our operations in Japan, a guy called Andrew, and he had worked in the past with Sugimori-san, and we had a short list of basically a million amazing game composers, which Ed had pulled together. You know, we're big fans of game music, and a lot of this was like, here's the wish list. No one on this list will ever work in the project. And Andrew was like, let me see what I can do about that for you. And then conversations spun up, and just like earlier this year, we've gotten a load of tracks starting to come through, and it's been a really, really satisfying experience.
Yeah, when Sugimori-san first saw the game, he'd done a bunch of preparation in advance, which we hadn't asked him to do, but he'd already had some ideas or whatever. And he saw the game, and apparently, I wasn't there, but apparently he immediately went, well, that's what my preparation ruined. Because he was because we said it was a detective game, so he was expecting a kind of noir-y, like kind of serious thing. And then like they showed him, you know, some of the game and some of the artwork, and he was like, okay, it's completely like not what I was expecting. But he was really enthused by that, actually. And that made me feel really good. Like that made me feel like we were probably going along the right lines, because it wasn't quite what he would have originally expected. And like I think he was originally a little bit unsure about working with a studio that he didn't know about. But luckily, this our guy Andrew hadn't worked with him directly, but had worked at Capcom for like 10 years, so was able to kind of use that and eventually kind of persuade him. And like it took a while. Like the negotiations took a while and all of that kind of stuff. But by the end, he was saying like, he said to us that he was really glad he said yes, because he felt like it was something that he wouldn't have been able to do with the Japanese team. You know, with the characters the way they are and things like that. So that was nice.
And obviously, you've got Moa Hato back on board to do the artwork. Did you go straight to her, or was it kind of like how did you end up working with her again?
No, I wanted to, but I was too scared. Basically, I met her for the first time early last year. We went to a concert together in Japan, and we had dinner afterwards. And I was planning. I'd literally, about 2 days before I went out, I'd finished making the prototype of this game, and it had been approved, like faster than anything I've ever worked on in my life. So I was like, oh, this is becoming a thing. And I remember thinking, like, what if you ask her while you're at dinner or whatever? But she just started talking about all the stuff she was doing. And I just thought, like, oh God, she's so busy that I completely chickened out, and I didn't ask her. And then about 3 or 4 months later, we just couldn't find anyone internally at Mediatonic who could do the work. So I said, well, can I start approaching? Can I put a call out on Twitter, get some portfolios, and like try and find someone? So I did that, never having any thought in a second that Moa would respond to it. But about a couple of weeks after I did it, she DM'd me just out of the blue, and she was like, how would you feel if I just like contributed just a little? She was like, I don't mind if I'm like the assistant character designer or whatever. She was like, even if it's just a little bit, it would be really nice to work together again. And I replied within seconds immediately. It was like, Moa, please do everything. And she was like, I mean, it was just crazy that she would ask to be involved. And it was good because she'd obviously had a great experience working with us with Hatoful, and so she was like, I'd really like to try working on something earlier with you guys. So it was very much based on that kind of relationship that we'd built up, and the friendship that me and her had built up as well. And then so I immediately said yes, let's do it. And then I was kind of terrified because I was like, is she going to get it? Is it like, I'd never worked with her before, so I was like, is it going to work? And I remember kind of sending over all the materials to her, preparing everything, prepared a lot of fashion reference, because obviously a Japanese person doesn't really have the same reference of 90s fashion that necessarily kind of a Western person does. So sent all that over, and within the next day, she sent back the main character, Honor, who isn't up there, just as she is. Like, it was literally the first try. She got it. And I was just like, okay, I think this is going to work out. The only things, she would get the characters straight away. The only things we'd ever iterate on were the fashions, just because I was so I'm so obsessed with 90s fashion that I just wanted to really get it right.
Yeah.
The official feedback loop for that was quite entertaining because Ed and Moa had a great relationship. It was very conversational, but there was effectively homework of like, okay, I need you to go away and watch season 1 of Friends.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, she did. I made her watch. Well, no, she did. She did that voluntarily, but I thought it was a great thing to do. But I did ask her to watch Queer Eye.
Oh yeah.
Because one of the I wanted to have like a character that was quite like Jonathan from Queer Eye.
Right.
So when we came to designing him, I was like, I really think you need to watch him to get his energy and like understand him. So yeah, I feel like we've probably like broadened her horizons a little bit, but she's always been. We've always had really similar interests. Like. One of the reasons we became friendly is that she loves RuPaul's Drag Race as much as I do. There's no way to watch it in Japan, but she finds ways. Yeah. But she's been obsessed with it, so that was the reason why we have Case 3 of the club is set in a drag club, and we've got a bunch of drag queens. It was literally because she joined, and I was like, I can get away with it now. Yeah.
Cool. So kind of by now, you're obviously kind of an old hand at this kind of, cross-continental development style. So how did your previous experiences kind of inform the way that you approach this particular game?
From my point of view, I think... So when we worked with Square Enix, we worked with a great character designer called Ryoma Ito, who'd worked on Final Fantasy 9, Final Fantasy 12, Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, like a bunch of games like that. He's like really good. He did all of the character designs for the main character of that game, and it was a great experience. But he was so busy that I basically had to send him all of the specifications for the characters or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
And then he would send it back, and we just had to take what we got basically.
Yeah.
And it was and he did a great job. So luckily, it was never an issue. But when it came to working on it this time, I was like, I really want there to be more of a kind of iterative feedback loop going on. So that's why we got Moa involved like over a year ago now.
Right.
Was that we just really spent, especially in the early days, we spent a lot of time just iterating on the art style and the characters and trying to come up with a style that didn't feel too anime, but also was anime enough, which was kind of something I was really keen on doing. And so it was. That really informed me wanting to get involved with that earlier, I think.
Yeah.
And from a pure logistical perspective, again, we come back to that just time zone difference and the fact that communication is so key. Like, it's always key amongst games, but it becomes a real challenge when someone's got to come up with a character that you haven't written all the scenes for, or the scenes in the game are not playable yet. Yeah. And you need to convey all the important things, because you can't just grab them to come look over your shoulder and be like, all right, let's brainstorm this to quite the same degree. So it was really important that we had the same united vision. We were talking back and forth, overcoming not just the geographical difference, the time difference, the language barrier, like all of that. We just had to make sure we were as explicit as possible, that we were all on the same page, and not just that they got our vision, but that we got what they were bringing to the project. Because it was super important that their voices were a key part of this game.
Yeah. And it's been a number of years now since you first kind of worked with Moa to bring sort of Hatoful Boyfriend to the West. So do you think it's become easier in a way to work with Japanese developers now, like than it was, say, in 2014? Are there more tools at your disposal to make that process easier?
I think at the moment, just across games and all industries, that we've just become a more global economy. So there is more of an understanding of, like, nothing ever truly sleeps. Everything's always going. Everyone's working on something somewhere. So it has gotten better. We've gotten better tools. We've got, not just the, email trails and that sort of thing, but we're always on Discord and making sure that communication pipelines are open. Yeah. And I think it's just a greater understanding in addition to those tools and how to use them. So it's been really important on all of our projects. But like I say, with this one, it's just felt crucial because we've not wanted to lose anything of their vision, because it's so important, the personal voices contributing to this project.
Yeah.
I think the fact that more people have been doing it has helped also that initial process of approaching these people and kind of saying, like, I know it's an lot to ask to work with a foreign team, but would you consider it? But there have been a lot more people doing it recently. I think as that goes on, then it will become easier in that way. People do often ask, like, why? Like, surely it would be easier just to work with somebody, you know, where there's less time difference and there's no language barrier. And that's, I mean, that is a good point, but it's very much for us, and certainly for me personally, it's just about wanting to work with people that I really admire.
Yeah.
Like, I just really want, you know, that I've grown up. I have a list of people I'd love to work with, and it's like because they inspired me to do what I'm doing now, and so I'm just so, like, to me, it's I just love the idea of being able to work with people that have a different viewpoint to you and a different cultural viewpoint to you, to create something that would have been better than you could have done yourself, you know.
Yeah. To a lot of us in the studio, like, I'm in my 30s at this point. Like, we grew up with games as these come from Japan. These are a magical thing. We could never make them happen outside of Japan.
Right,
that's changed over time, obviously. You know, it's ebbed and flowed. It's become a very global industry. But the fact that we found a way not just to work in video games, but to work with the people who inspired us to do so in the first place is just unparalleled. It's unreal that it's become a reality, and the fact that it keeps working is like, I don't understand how it's still working, and the fact that I'm talking about it makes me think that it's going to stop at some point, but like, it's been a dream come true, and
So sort of just one final question before we open it up to the audience. So what would you say then is the secret to a successful collaboration between kind of East and West developers? Like, is it the existing relationships? Is it being flexible, or something else entirely?
That's a very good question. I think, so what I've certainly learned is that it really is, a lot of it is about relationships and leveraging that way you can. But it's also, you know, we didn't have a relationship with Moa before we did that, before we approached her. And what I hope is that through us all really kind of respecting her work and, you know, trying, like, going that extra mile to, you know, foster a relationship, that's kind of what kind of got us to where we are. And it's kind of the same with Square Enix. It was a long process of kind of getting to know each other, and I think one of the major things is being open to understanding how they individually work.
Right.
Everyone, not just across the culture gap, but every creator works in a different way and likes instruction in a different way and provides things in a different way. So, like, when we worked with Sugimori, one of the first things we said to him was, how do you want to do this? Like, what's the best format for working with you? And he was able to kind of do that. And one of the things I loved, which he kind of, when we were still doing the discussing, one of his he came with a list of like things. This is how I'd want it to work,
right?
Which I really appreciated, because I didn't want to second guess it. But one of his points which I loved was, I don't want to get feedback from more than 2 people. Which, if you've ever been a freelancer, or if you've ever like tried to work outside of something, and you get all of this conflicting feedback from people, it's so irritating and hard to coalesce. And he was like, I don't, you know, I want you to give me feedback, but I want it to come through one person, so that it's like, so that it's collated on your side, so that you know. And to me, that was just like, that was a voice of experience. And I was immediately like, that's a baller. That's a baller move. I really appreciate that. So we were just immediately like, yeah, fine, whatever.
Cool. Yeah.
I think games in general are all about a united vision. The best games are when a load of people in a collaborative effort are working together towards one cohesive vision. And I think one of the strengths of working with Japanese creatives with this, or Japanese publishers in the case of Heavenstrike Rivals, is that you've got a lot of different cultural touchstones at your base. You're keeping it as interesting and diverse as possible out the gate, by virtue of so many people with so many different levels of understanding are touching every step of the process. It's just fantastic. And a personal career highlight and an anecdote with the feedback process with the Sugimori stuff is that I was sending around his music to everyone key in the studio to make sure that everyone was happy with the direction we were going in with this. And the first reply I got was just a single sentence of, well, that's a bop, which I think is one of the best personal, professional emails I've ever received. So.
Great. Well, I think we've got some time for some if any of the audience have any questions. Graham will rush to you with a microphone. If just feel free to stick up your hand, and then he'll come and find you. While you think of some, I do have some backup questions.
Okay, good.
To give you guys some thinking time. So when we're sort of going back to your work on Heavenstrike, which was your favourite Square Enix franchise that you actually got to work on?
Well, for me, it is The Secret of Mana, Seiken Densetsu 2 stuff, because I grew up playing that with my brother, and it was an impossible thing to beat that no one in the world could possibly have completed. So it was this, object of mystery to me that was really formative, part of my childhood. So when we got to work with it, it was really just like, wow, we can make those rabbit mouths really big. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, it would probably have been Final Fantasy IV,
right?
Which is my favourite of the older ones.
Yeah.
One of my favourites of the whole series, actually. So, that was definitely. It was great to get the chance to work on one of the mainline games, because they're the ones that are most fiercely protected. So, so that was good, and it also that was for us was a real show that they actually did trust us to a degree. So
yeah, that's great. Any more questions from the audience? Oh, there's one in the middle there.
Hi. Have you spent much time in Japan, or have you done it all remotely, what you've been doing?
Mostly it's remotely. When we were working on Heavenstrike with Square Enix, we would go over about every 3 months to visit them. And in those instances, because that's a publisher-developer relationship, which is very different to the relationship of just asking somebody to do a certain part of your game, like just your artwork or your music or something. That needed really, really strong communication, because obviously everyone had to be on the same page. So it was very important for us to be in the same room a lot of the time on that one. But when it comes to for example, Murder by Numbers, no, I haven't been out since I went out and saw Moa last time. The internet just makes it so easy to kind of communicate, and Moa and I are communicating across multiple platforms, because we're sending work emails through email, and then we're sending tweets about stuff we like on Twitter. So, that's kind of that kind of made it able to work there.
I think most of the team as well will jump at any opportunity you throw our way to go to Japan for some vaguely professional reason. So I've been over there once and met with people involved, but largely it was planning business dinners during a holiday where I was going over there. The whole team's been really busy actually making the game, which makes it hard to carve out a whole week to 2 weeks to go out of country. And like Ed says, the communication tools are so good. We're speaking to Moa and Sugimori on a daily basis at this point. It's almost like they're not half the world away.
I think it's probably worth saying though that I don't know if we would have been able to get Sugimori-san involved if our guy hadn't been going to meet him. It took 2 or 3 meetings before it happened, and I think without that FaceTime, it probably would have been very difficult to get over the kind of initial. I mean, if you've ever done freelance, you know that whenever you're working with a new client, you have you're kind of unsure about how it's going to go, and you need to know that they're kind of worthwhile, and they're going to actually pay you and stuff like that. So that kind of stuff does need some real FaceTime, I think. Yeah.
Oh, a couple more questions from the front, and then by the camera after that.
Now that you have experience working with Japan, I was wondering if there are any other countries or cultures you want to work with on future projects.
Yes, I mean, I have a list of creative people that I would love to work with, and it's not just from Japan. It's people from Canada and America, and yeah, I mean, I think the problem is kind of sometimes seeing that stuff and kind of becoming aware of it, because I think certainly the indie scene now is doing a good job of getting kind of games from other cultures to kind of surface a bit better. But I'm just inspired by whatever I see in the work that people do. So it's literally, if I see something that someone's done and I like it, I'm like, yeah, of course I'd work with you.
We've worked with several partners on other games all around the world, and it's been a great experience, a different experience in every single instance. But yeah, there are always more opportunities out there. I don't know of necessarily individuals that would be on my shortlist. Well, one thing that's super interesting to me is a game that's just recently come out this month, Indivisible. It's got a bit more of a Indonesian flavor to it, things that you don't generally see in games so much. It's when things like that get brought to the surface that I find that personally really exciting. I don't know what relationships necessarily lead to that, but I'd love to find out.
One last question.
Hi, just wanted to say the art is really, really good. I had a question about it. So Moa was like the principal character artist.
Yeah.
What was the size of the team that was probably helping her out with the assets? And like, and if there was quite a big team, how did you find going about like ensuring like visual consistency and that everything looked like it was in the same world? Because I sometimes have that trouble when working with other artists is getting that consistency.
Well, we were very lucky in that Moa works together. Moa has like I don't know if it's assistant or colleague. I don't know what the structure is there, but she has somebody that she works with in the same office in Japan. So when it came to actually, we got into production and we needed to like really ramp up the amount of stuff, we brought in that person, Damu. She's known as Damu. Also worked on Hatoful Boyfriend. So Moa was able to kind of overlook that herself, which was really important. There were a couple of occasions where sometimes I would look at something and I'd say to Moa, like, I don't know, but does this fit in with what you've done? And she would then like take another look at it. But I very much trusted her to kind of do that. I mean, but you can talk to some of the other artwork in the game.
So Moa and Damu were our character artists, and there wasn't a question of necessarily matching that character style because they could take on all the character work. But we had an artist in Studio Tudor, who is in the audience today, I believe, was working on the backgrounds primarily. And it was a unique challenge for him making sure that he was matching the style of these characters because, you know, character and background art isn't one-to-one, it's not exactly the same. But you will notice if a character is on a background that doesn't quite fit the style. So I think it was a challenge for him. Like, it can't be undersold that he did a lot of hard work to make that like a really nicely distinguished style in its own right. So it was, it was a collaborative effort between artists. However, I think we are very lucky to work with such talented people as Moa and Tudor. So it was very easy from our perspective.
I think also the thing that was important for us to realize was that as a visual novel, the character art is basically the most important thing. So what we would do is we would get Moa to do, Moa was the first person we worked with really on the artwork side of things, and we got that style, and then it was a case of, okay, this is kind of the cornerstone around which everything else has to fit. So kind of having that done first and then matching everything else to that was a really useful thing to have, yeah.
All right, I think that's probably all the time we've got now, but thank you very much for coming to join us, and let's give Ed and Luke a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We've got a load of like stickers and stuff if you want to come up and get stickers of the cute robot. Thank you.